Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 3 of the Stained Glass Podcast. I am your host, Jessica Spurlock, and on today's episode, I am excited to have our very first guest on the podcast, my sister, Stephanie Taylor. Let's get started. Thank you so much for coming on the Stained Glass Podcast, Stephanie. How are you today?
I am awesome. I'm happy to be here. I'm honored that you chose me to be your first guest on your podcast. So here we are, sitting in my closet, having a water and some laughs, and we're going to talk about some stuff.
Yes, we are. Looking forward to diving into our topic in a little bit. But first, a bit of background. Stephanie is my younger sister, and we are 16 months apart. We were raised like twins, and we had a lot of simultaneous experiences growing up. I mean, we even got married 3 weeks apart. Our poor parents.
They're fine.
They're okay.
They're all
yeah,
right.
they bounce back kind of
back.
quick. So Stephanie is also a marketing genius.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
She is a mom. She has very good fashion sense, even though she may have had a tomboy stage growing up like everybody else did.
I like that. Hey, the Miami Dolphins, I mean, I like that because they were teal and they had a dolphin. So what more did you need in the 90s, you know?
Exactly. Complete with acid wash jeans, the big headband,
That's right.
And with, of course, the Ariel hair from Disney's Little Mermaid.
I did. You had to flip it in, what was it,
Yeah,
1989 is when that came out.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
couldn't have been too long after that.
No, probably not. So tell us more about yourself. Fill in the gaps where I might have left out some details that you want to share with the Stained Glass Podcast listeners.
Born and raised in Ohio for the most part. And, yeah, I mean, you kind of said it best. I mean, marketing is kind of the thing that I do for professionally, but it's also a passion of mine. I've been in healthcare marketing for probably, 10 to 12 years or so at this point. Everything from the medical spa industry to just the general healthcare outpatient, inpatient industry too. Love that. I'm a Disney fanatic. I have a daughter who is 7, and she is my husband and my whole world. I've been married for, it'll be 17 years this year, which is insane. In May, we'll be together for 18 years. So,
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's life, life happens, and it's quick, I feel, I'm going to be 38. How am I going to be 38?
I know, I'm going to be 39 in a few weeks.
It's weird to talk about myself, though. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I guess that's kind of the whole point of, why we're here today. Yes. We're going to share stories.
We're definitely going to share some stories. Hopefully something that you will share today will resonate with our listeners and inspire them to see the beauty through the brokenness. How the broken pieces of Stephanie Taylor's story can bring God glory. So before we get started talking about that story, one thing that Stephanie didn't mention that I will bring up is that Stephanie is both a lover and a performer of musical theater. She has performed in several musicals with her theater troupe. Talk about some of the roles you have portrayed.
Oh boy, geez, it's been so long since I've been on the stage. But the last one that I did, I played Doralee Rhodes, that role was made famous by Dolly Parton in 9 to 5, the musical, and that was a lot of fun. And then the one before that, it was White Christmas, the musical, which I played Betty Haynes, one of the Haynes sisters, and that was Rosemary Clooney's role opposite Bing Crosby. And so that was
probably my favorite, if I'm being honest.
That was fun. And honestly, though, I loved the music of Hairspray. Yes. I was in Hairspray as Velma Von Tussle.
Yes, which I couldn't believe this. Hairspray was her first time ever auditioning, and then she landed the lead antagonist.
She was, it was typecasting. Yes. So.
And then you got the bad mayor in the play with the Elvis songs, right?
It was Elvis. It's All Shook Up, the musical.
Yeah, All Shook Up. That's right.
That was probably the most fun I've ever had on a show was during All Shook Up,
really?
The musical. Yeah, that was a blast.
Yeah.
Not as much pressure with that one, right. I felt, but it was a lot of fun though.
It was very odd to see you play someone so differently from your personality and do it very well, I might add.
Yeah.
And I bet that's what drew you to those roles in the first place.
It's fun to be someone else for a minute on stage. So I always enjoyed that. It's been way too long. It was 2014. That was the last time I was on stage, and it's definitely 2023 today. So
that's almost a decade since you graced the stage with your presence and many talents. And in that decade, you've been a busy lady. You've moved up in your marketing job at the local hospital. And like you said earlier, 7 years ago, you became a mom. And during that experience of becoming a mom, Stephanie, you went through some hard times, and God made something beautiful out of those hard times. The point of the Stained Glass podcast, as I mentioned already, is to see the beauty through the brokenness and how the broken pieces of our story can reveal God's glory. And I wanted to talk to my sister about a season of her life where that was evident. Stephanie, please tell us a little bit more about that situation.
It's heavy, I mean, this kind of stuff is heavy. And I think that sometimes it's through the heavy topics that people can really be reached. And I don't know, I think that it can make the biggest difference, in someone's life. And I think that I guess the topic per se that I'll talk about is that of postpartum depression. And I think that there's a lot of stigma around mental illness. There's a lot of stigma around postpartum and even perinatal depression that, you shouldn't feel a certain way, or you ought to be grateful, and so just shake it off and walk it off and you'll be fine. And it's just the baby blues, you're good, and it's maybe it's not though. So I laugh about it, you know what I mean? Because my sense of humor now is how I deal with it. But at the time, in 2015, it wasn't funny.
No, I can certainly imagine. And I think that is one way that this will truly resonate with my audience, because we all have situations that are not shiny and bright in our lives. Some may have had things happen to them that can cause depressive episodes or a chemical imbalance in their body that they need to get checked out. Or just to talk to someone about the struggles they face can do wonders for their mental health, and that there is no shame in getting help.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the biggest thing is that, there is help to be had. And, I guess if there's one message that I could get out is that, there's absolutely no shame at all in taking medication. You know what I mean? I know that the audience for this podcast is mostly Christian, probably, I would think. Maybe some not, and that's cool too. But guys, God put doctors here for a reason. They put people that knows pharmacy, pharmaceuticals, chemistry, and brain chemistry and how things work. I mean, y'all, take your medicine. It's okay. No judgment.
For real. That is a very powerful statement right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of well-meaning Christians say, okay, well, we're gonna pray for you, and we're gonna lay hands, and we're gonna anoint, and we're going to put you on the prayer list, and all of these things. Absolutely, do that, please put me on the prayer list. I need all of the prayers. You know what I mean? But there's something to be said about modern medicine as well, and I think that it's a dangerous rhetoric to think that, you can pray mental illness away, because you can't, in my opinion. So, yeah, go to the doctor, take your medicine, and we owe it to our families to be healthy and happy as best as we can. And part of that means, taking care of yourself. And, if that includes therapy and medication, then there is no shame in that at all.
Absolutely. You've given some great advice here, but let's backtrack a little bit and go back to the beginning of the story. When did you think that there might be a problem?
When I was pregnant, I'll say that I felt pretty great physically. I had a very uneventful physical pregnancy.
Praise the Lord for that.
I know, right? Because so many people, I mean, you hear horror stories and I all this morning sickness and all this stuff. And I honestly didn't have any of that, thank goodness. And, but I did notice that I was just sinking into a little bit of a hole. just mentally, it was hard for me to focus. It was hard for me to concentrate. I would get really really weepy just for no reason. And at first I was thinking, oh, this is just, it's hormones, like my body is changing, and this is, this is a part of being pregnant. And so,
So about how far along in your pregnancy were you? Or did it happen gradually over time?
I feel like I was maybe about midway through, I feel like. And I really started, because I had no idea that there was even such a thing as perinatal depression.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know. I had no clue. And so I was talking to my provider, who I really love my provider. She was wonderful. And I had a great relationship with her in terms of feeling comfortable enough to be vulnerable in that place to say, hey, I'm feeling a certain way and I don't know if this is normal. And they have screening tools and they have ways of figuring out, where you fall on the scale. And it's like, oh, okay, so maybe this isn't normal. And there are some medications that are safe to take while you're pregnant. And it's interesting to note that, as soon as I started that regime, probably about a month or 2 months later, I did see, I felt the cloud lift. Yeah.
It's interesting that you said that you hadn't heard of perinatal depression, because I hadn't either. And thanks to what you had gone through, I was aware of it, and I actually experienced it myself, especially during the 3rd trimester. I wasn't excited about my pregnancy or about anything for that matter, and my doctor encouraged me to speak to a counselor. For me, I had a lot of stressors that were external to my pregnancy, with a medically complicated child and several other things. And I was able to talk through most of my circumstances and issues that I was having. And for me, it was helpful to do that because I'm typically the one who bottles up my emotions because I don't have time to feel them in the moment because somebody always needs me. For me, I was able to have that cloud lift in some fashion, but honestly, it wasn't totally lifted until I gave birth. Was that your experience?
Oh, no. See, it was polar opposite for me. Things got so much worse. And, I laugh because I can laugh now. You know what I mean? Guys, come on now. No, it got worse. And so this is great for all you listeners. Like, sometimes it does get better. But guess what? Sometimes it might get worse. And so in case it does, go ahead and have some resources put in place to help yourself out. Because no, I'm look, the whole point of the podcast, right, is to be raw and honest, and these topics can be messy. And here's the deal: when you give birth or you have a baby or whatever, there's so many things that go on about how it should be. Oh, it should be so magical, and there should be this rainbow that comes across the sky, and there's sparkles that fly, from they fall from the ceiling when I give birth. And no, it's not like that.
It's not like that.
And that's okay. It's okay for it to be a hot
Yes,
mess.
definitely. Would you feel comfortable sharing just a smidgen that happened the opposite way that you expected?
Yeah, gosh.
What didn't go right?
Well, let me think about this. You were in the room, So,
I couldn't even leave the room to go to the bathroom because of how quickly everything went down.
Look, I'm first of all, I have to say I'm grateful because there are so many other people that have it worse. But my experience was valid, and I think that sometimes as women, we can get into this, harmful rhetoric of like, oh, well, I need to just be grateful, and oh, so many people have it worse. Like, no. Okay, see, girl, your experience was valid. Okay, like, I'm gonna listen. If nobody has validated you today, I'm gonna go ahead and validate you right now. Your experience was valid. Okay, it really was. And do other people have it worse? Yes, but that doesn't help. That rhetoric and that phrase does not help. It's not helpful.
Yeah, recently our pastor gave us a really good piece of advice. we're going through a lot of little things that we felt guilty for being sad about. And mind you, I mean, the things that we were calling little things really weren't little at all. I mean, we had just gone through so much worse that they felt little and minor to us. And he said, and anyways, he said, no, 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 no. Give yourself permission to grieve those things.
Absolutely. And that's honestly, that's something that my therapist worked with me in the months, after my daughter was born, was grieving the things that I had built up in my mind about how things are supposed to be. I was supposed to be able to breastfeed my daughter. I was supposed to, not have massive anxiety attacks while I was trying to breastfeed her. See, what was supposed to happen was I was supposed to put the baby to my breast, and again, there should have been a unicorn show up. I should have heard a little tap at the window, and it should have been a unicorn right there. And unfortunately, none of that happened. Instead, I hated breastfeeding, hated it, did not enjoy it. And guess what? Hey, ladies listening, you're normal if you don't like breastfeeding, okay? I hated it. I really did, okay? Like, I loved the moment of bonding. And look, and here's the other thing. My daughter, like, my kid will not leave me alone. Like, we are bonded like glue, okay? So if you're sitting here right now pregnant, or if you're sitting here right now, a brand new mother that's struggling, girl, your baby is still gonna love you and be bonded to you just like they would have been before, because it's all of this harmful, toxic, I'll say the word again because I don't know another word, rhetoric. It's just this golden hour that's supposed to be so magical, and it's like, oh no, if you don't have the golden hour, then you're out of luck, I guess, And I didn't have the golden hour, with my daughter, because I hemorrhaged and I was bleeding out, and they could not stop the bleeding, and it was scary there for a minute. All of a sudden, there was a lot of people in the room, and I was in excruciating pain as my epidural did not work. And all this being said, I'd do it again tomorrow, you know what I mean, for my daughter. I would do it again tomorrow for my daughter, and we're bonded and stuff. But, I think that we romanticize in our minds what it should be like. And when it's not like that, then we think that we're a failure, and we think that, well, we did something wrong. And then there's guilt. There's this excruciating guilt that happens where, you thought it was going to be one way, you had it in your mind, and now it's not that way. And now I feel guilty because I must have done something wrong. And you didn't do anything wrong. You really didn't.
Now, I'm asking this to all of my guests, but I already know the answer you're going to give. But I'll ask it anyways. Has this trial been resolved, or is this a work in progress? If it's a work in progress, how are you dealing with it today? Is it getting better?
Well, I think that it's not resolved, really, because I still take medicine every day. You know what I mean? And so, is it livable? Absolutely. Do I have things put in place such as, I don't know, for example, prayer, meditation time, time spent with God. I have things put in place to help me, but it's kind of like, if you have a chronic disease like blood pressure, you got high blood pressure, you need to take blood pressure medications. You don't just stop your blood pressure meds just because you got a good reading once at the doctor's office. It's kind of the same principle. I don't know. That's just for me. So is it better? Absolutely. It's so much better. It's so much better than what it was. So Yes, I mean, in a way, but I resolved is a strong word, I feel like. I mean, resolved is like, oh, it's gone, you know? No, it's, of course it's not gone. I take I take a Wellbutrin, 150 milligrams of Wellbutrin every day. Let me just put myself out there like that. I don't care, you know what I mean? Let's normalize this. Let's talk about it. It's not a big deal. It's really not. It's normal. It's okay to take medicine if you need to. There's no shame in it, and I have no shame. Clearly, right? Like I'm shouting it from the closet.
That is something that we need to write down and tell ourselves every single day, and that is that there's no shame, absolutely no shame in getting whatever help you need for yourself.
Absolutely not. Nope. And so that was a little bit of a rough patch, there. And I mean, it's hard anyway, just being a new mom, but I mean, it's doubly hard when you're recovering from the hemorrhage, you're recovering from the DNC, and then, that was definitely a place. I was definitely in a place battling the postpartum where I felt very broken, and I didn't feel normal for a long time, after that.
How would you say that this broken piece of your story has brought glory to God? How did God use this trial to teach you something about himself?
Well, I think that it's a testament to the fact that, God never gives up on us, ever, and we could feel like he's 100 miles away, but he's not. No. He's right there. So interestingly, when I was on the floor in the bathroom in the dark, bawling my eyes out while my daughter was napping and my husband was at work, I felt pretty alone in that moment. But I wasn't alone, actually.
No.
And you, listening to this, you might feel like you're alone right now, but you're not. You're not alone. We're never alone. God is always there. Jesus is always there. You literally, I mean, guys, I talk to myself, but people, who are you talking to? I'm talking to God. Mind your business. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you've done that since we were kids.
Yeah. Like, I'm having a conversation with my father, okay? I need you to buzz off.
What you just said about feeling alone, yet the truth is that God will never leave you, that'll preach.
Yeah. That, I feel, is the key in all of this, is that, depression, mental illness, really any kind of illness, or really any kind of brokenness that you might be experiencing in your life, the key is that you are never alone. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is, I think, the shining moment. I think that is the connection of, where God takes the broken pieces and he stitches them back together, because he's like, girl, get up off of that bathroom floor. Like, stop it. You have support. You are divinely guided and supported. Hello. I mean, we're kind of like royalty, really. I mean, right?
Absolutely. You gave some great advice earlier on the podcast with not being afraid to seek help in the form of counseling or medication, whatever's required to feel better. If you could go back to that time in your life and give yourself some other advice, what would it be?
If I could give myself one piece of advice, I would say just hang on. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It will, And I think it's tough, for new moms, because I think that, especially the ones that are battling any kind of depression, is you think that it's never going to be the same. It's never going to be back to the way it was. My body will never be the same. My mind will never be the same. And you mourn that kind of thing. I mean, and I remember that. And the thing is that your life won't ever be the same. But you know what? It's going to be better. It will be better. But you have to give it time. You have to be brave to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And just know that these things take a little bit of time, and that it's going to get better. It gets better. That's the biggest piece of advice I think that I'd give myself is that just hang on. It's going to get better.
Better doesn't necessarily mean the same, and better can look different than you would ever predict sometimes.
Because it'll never be the same. Your life will never be the same, and that's okay. Because, I mean, I think that we are made to change. We're made for change. And I think that's the whole point. I mean, we're supposed to grow. We're supposed to ebb and flow. We're supposed to change. I think if you're not changing, then you need to check yourself.
Change can produce growth. I mean, I've seen that in my own life as well. And when you give yourself permission to grieve what was, like we said earlier in the episode, but try not to wallow in it. I mean, it is hard to do.
Try not to. You know. Yeah, try not to wallow. I mean, be aware, but I mean, you know, if you find yourself wallowing, get a therapist. I don't know.
Talk it out with someone.
Talk it out.
Go for coffee.
Yeah.
With a friend.
There's so many things that you can do. I mean, there's so many layers of, you know, what you should do to help with that. Okay, like medication, therapy, time with friends, exercise, eat right, try to drink some water if you can, like
all of the things that people say are quote unquote self-care these days.
And find your passion too. I think that's a good thing, you know. I mean, find something that and really lean into the things that bring you joy, you know, in this life.
Absolutely. If you have been through a season of life, I would encourage you to reach out to someone who is currently going through or about to go through that season and just ask them if they're okay. Come alongside them and support them. Listen to them, but remind yourself that every situation is unique. Remind them that they are not alone. And if you yourself felt alone in that season, make a conscious effort to be a sounding board for the other person. I mean, sometimes it's all that's needed. And sometimes you need a little bit more, and that's okay. And speaking of a sounding board,
there is actually a suicide and crisis lifeline out there. So we all know 911. You can actually call or text 988. That is the lifeline. Also, you can visit 988lifeline.org. And they help prevent suicide, and they provide 24/7 free and confidential support for people in distress. Another resource I want to share is the Postpartum Support International. If you go to postpartum.net, they have a ton of great resources there. And so if you want the number for that, that's 1-800-944-4773. And they also speak Spanish too. So, yeah.
And you can access all of those in the show notes as well. And thank you very much for coming on to the Stained Glass podcast today. I had so much fun talking to you and getting to catch up. And I hope our listeners enjoyed the conversation as well. I appreciate your willingness to share with my listeners of the Stained Glass podcast a broken piece of your story and how it reveals God's glory.
I loved it. Anytime, sis. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
Before I signed off, I wanted to briefly touch on one of the key messages from my conversation with Stephanie. That message is that you are not alone. There are people who have been through similar circumstances to you and would be happy, more than happy probably, to come alongside you and support you during this season of your life. But not only that, God is always with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. He promises us this in His Word. In Deuteronomy 31, verses 8 and 9, it says, "It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed." Let us pray. Dear Lord, I thank you for the precious time I spent in conversation with my sister Stephanie. It sounds silly to do this, but I thank you for the rough patch she went through with perinatal and postpartum depression so that she can learn to lean on you and to trust that you are always there with her. I thank you for your omnipresence, Lord. I pray that my listeners will feel your presence with them too in times of loneliness. Thank you for each and every one of them. Amen. I would love to pray for you if you are going through a similar circumstance of feeling alone. You can message your prayer request to me on social media. You can find me on Instagram at the Stained Glass Podcast and on Facebook in the Stained Glass Podcast group. In the next episode, I'll be telling a personal story of a pressure cooker situation in my life and how God used it to draw attention to a problem area of my health. It's a special episode with a special message just for you. It drops in 2 weeks, which is Valentine's Day in the U.S. Until then, this has been Jessica Spurlock with the Stained Glass Podcast. Go be a blessing.